Hello everyone, again this is Frank DiMora coming from the last chronicles of planet Earth. If this is the first time you've seen my YouTube channel by mistake, I'm glad that you found me by mistake. But if you're interested in knowing what signs to look for in these last days according to the prophets and Jesus Christ and our Lord, you can go to my website, which is www.bibleprophecyman.com. And once you're there, you'll see the cover, the front and the back cover of my book. And right below it is a link. You click to the link and you can download the book today for free with no strings attached. Now, one of the signs of the last days, which is really important and critical for any believer to be watching, has to do with many scriptures. But I'm going to kind of isolate this for you today because I want to center on Israel and the United States and what the United States is about to do, or what it appears it's about to do according to the news that I just pulled up recently. I'm going to give you the scripture first, and just as you go to my website, when you download my book, you'll see that the first thing that I show you were the Bible prophecies, and then you'll see the explanation of the prophecy, and then you'll see the actual fulfillment or the progression that's actually taken place now that's leading to the fulfillment of that prophecy. But if you go to your own Bible and you read chapter 12 of the book of Genesis, God gave anyone who's dealing with Israel either a blessing or a curse. And you'll find this in chapter 12 and verse 2 and 3. And it says this, "And I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee." He's talking about Israel. "And I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curse thee." And so we know that either if you're with Israel and you're blessing Israel, God promised that He was going to bless you. And if you don't go with Israel and you go against Israel and you come against Israel, then God was going to curse you. Now let's go into Joel chapter 3. Now Joel chapter 3 again, there is a prophecy that talks about what God is going to be doing to the people who come against Israel and try to divide the land of Israel. In chapter 3 verse 2 it says, "I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land." And when you read this Joel, you'll find out that Jehoshaphat is actually the place of destruction. So God is warning anybody who splits up or parts Israel, God is going to destroy. And then again, let's go to Zechariah, and this was really a potent piece of scripture here because this is in our face right now. It says this according to Zechariah, again this is the Old Testament, in chapter 12 verse 3, "And in that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it will be cut in pieces, though all the people of the world or the earth will be gathered against it." So here we're told some very important issues. Number one, anybody that burdens themselves over Jerusalem, God promised He was going to cut them to pieces. Anybody who comes against Israel, again, we see just like He saw the curse in Genesis chapter 12, God is going to put that curse and destroy you because you came against Jerusalem and Israel. And in this scripture, it says in the last days, obviously, all the nations will be coming against Israel in the last days. And this is why we're starting to see all the nations turning against Israel and coming against Israel. Again, remember this, that all that burden themselves shall be cut into pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered against it. So it's not, excuse me, I've been sick and you'll have to pardon me for coughing here, but it doesn't say they may come against Israel. It says all the people of the earth will be gathered against Israel. So we know that even the allies that Israel once had will be turning against Israel and coming against Israel, and obviously coming under the curse because they came against Israel. Now here's some news about the United States in this peace agreement that Barack Obama has been trying to get the Palestinians and the Israelis to come together and form this peace agreement. And as you know, it's eluded. This peace agreement has eluded every president since Jimmy Carter. Now, Jimmy Carter managed Egypt and Israel to sign a peace agreement, and that held up until around January this year, when Egypt's Mubarak was ousted out of office, and now the Muslim Brotherhood, who were the front runners to take over Egypt, want to scrap the peace treaty. So this is all part of the prophecy. But I want to show you this, because when they're talking peace and safety, according to Paul the Apostle in 1 Thessalonians 5:3, that's when the sudden destruction is going to be coming. And according to Zechariah, which we really have to pay attention to, these things are happening right now, and you'll see that America, with all the disasters that they've been facing, I really believe that this is part of the hand of God coming and passing judgment, the curse falling on the United States, because they're in attempts to divide up Israel and divide up Jerusalem. There's an article that came out today. Israel Media reveals that the U.S. President's forthcoming Mid-East peace speech, this is what he's going to be talking about. I believe that this is going to be happening next week. It says, Jerusalem, May 17th. The U.S. President, Barack Obama, will call on Israel to withdraw to the 1967 borders and agree to additional concessions that will enable resumption of the peace process. This, according to the Israeli daily Yedioth Adrianoth, revealed on Tuesday. So what Barack Obama wants to do, and what if it happens, this is going to be really bad for the United States. Barack Obama is going to say Israel has to pull back to the 1967 borders. What does this mean? Well, for those of you who don't know prophecy, in 1967, Israel went to war against the Arabs. Israel won that war, and in that war, as a result of the spoils, they took East Jerusalem back, which is the most holiest site or the third most holiest site to the Muslims, but it is the most holiest site to the Jews, because that's where the first and the second temple were for the Jewish sacrifices and worshiping God there. And so, for the first time in almost 2,000 years, Israel was again in holding of this Temple Mount. And Barack Obama wants, according to, if this is a good source, coming out of the Middle East, if he actually does this, which we're going to be watching the news to see if he actually does this, he's going to try to force the Israelis to give back these 67 borders, which would mean he's going to try to give East Jerusalem back to the Palestinians. And this is definitely a product of a curse that will fall upon the United States. It says the newspaper claimed to have obtained a draft of Obama's speech, or planned speech, at the State Department on Thursday, which will outline the administration's Middle East policy in light of the anti-government protests that have swept the region over the past year. Keep in mind the protests that are going out. Jesus told us in the last days there would be civil unrest, kingdom against kingdom. You'll see that in Matthew 24:7. And this is a product of fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And because what's happening in the Middle East, now they're trying to head towards Israel. We saw the march of May 15th, where Syria, the Lebanese, the Palestinians, both in West Bank and the Gaza, and the Egyptians who sailed a ship on the way into the Gaza, they were marching and going in, trying to infiltrate Israel. And we see that these are the same nations, by the way, that are in Psalm 83, and these are the preludes to this coming war in Psalm 83. says the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said Sunday that Obama will raise the need for the peace process. However, he did not reveal whether the president planned to present the diplomatic initiative to revive the process after the negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians broke down last September. It says, according to Yedioth Ahronoth, Obama will call on Israel to withdraw the 1967 ceasefire lines with territory adjustments that will agreed on the negotiations with the Palestinian National Authority. The president will label the West Bank settlements as illegal and emphasize that Israel must halt their construction. So Barack Obama's plans, if this report is correct, he's going to tell them to stop the constructions. They're illegal. Now this is one step. The paving stones I can see being laid down for September because the Abbas, which is one of the leaders for the Palestinian organization, is going before the UN trying to get the United Nations to recognize the Palestinian state and legally force a two-state nation inside Israel. And this is supposed to be set for this September. And this article also says the date, the time period for September. So this is what we should really be watching for. It says Obama's position on the settlement blocks, which Israel slates to remain under its sovereignty in any peace deal, is yet unclear. The president is also expected to announce his solution regarding the status of Jerusalem and call for its division. In other words, he wants to divide Jerusalem. Man, Zechariah 12:3, right in the face of the United States. It says the U.S. envisions a city as a shared capital of two states, Israel and Palestine, side by side in peace. Such a stand was essentially echo the so-called Clinton parameters often offered by then Bill Clinton in the year 2000, which called predominantly Arab neighborhoods to come under the Palestinian sovereignty while Jewish neighborhoods remaining within the Israeli territories. So what we have here is some really important information. We need to be watching what's going to be happening on Thursday with this announcement, because I can guarantee you this. Every time the United States goes against Israel and tries to divide Israel, there's a natural disaster. He's in the process right now of drafting this speech together, and look what's happening in the week prior to him making this announcement. We have seen record tornadoes sweep about 15 or 16 states in the Midwest and the Mideast. Then a week later we saw the massive floodings that are taking place right now. And the Mississippi River is rising in some places. When you look at the first post that I put up today, if you go to my website, 11 feet records in some of the places, and this is an area where they haven't seen stuff like this since 1937. And you'll notice that in my post today, if you go look at it, every year we're seeing these massive storms coming, and they're getting worse and worse, and records are being broken every year. And don't think that it's a coincidence that these things show up when Barack Obama or these past presidents try to go and divide Israel up, because they're happening around the same exact time as they're making efforts to split Israel. This is a byproduct of God's curse. Now, many of you won't believe this, but many of you are going to find out the truth, and what God wrote here is actually going to be in all of our faces. And I showed you a little bit about what happened in Japan. When Japan claimed that they were going to send $30 million to the Palestinians and help them support a two-state. And then 2 days later, they had the 9.0 earthquake, and look, they're still in a disaster. So we really need to watch what Barack Obama's doing, and we need to pay attention to what Zechariah 12:3 and Genesis 12:3, and also what Joel chapter 3 tells us. So you'll see what I'm talking about. This is not a laughing matter. God is real, and His word will be fulfilled.